Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time I have the Galaxy A06 and we're going to have a full review. Let's get started. This device is part of Samsung's low range. It is the cheapest they currently have in their catalog, although there are two configurations. One that has 64 gigabytes of storage at a launch price in Mexico of 2,599 pesos. That's approximately $125, although remember that prices here are not the same as over there. There is another edition with 128 gigabytes of storage at a price of 2,799 pesos, a very small difference. In dollars, it would be more or less 135. So it is best to purchase the 128 version. By all means, avoid the 64 version because it will fill up very easily considering the size of today's applications. I should anticipate that in this price range, the truth is that even the competitors are going to be very simple. There's not one that stands out too much above all the others. So what I would recommend you would be to purchase this device if it's on a promotion that makes it even cheaper. But if you have more or less this money, the most recommendable thing would be to acquire mid-range devices from past years, which you can surely find them more or less at this price. Anyway, in this video we will talk specifically about this model that has a very widespread distribution, and that can be one of its positive points. Since being a Galaxy, you can find it both in Samsung stores and in physical stores and online stores of different distributors. So that is also a benefit that will allow you to explore more possibilities to find some discount. Let's quickly move on to talk about the design. In this case, on the front, we will find quite thick bezels. I've come to expect it in the price range for being a Galaxy, but I think in the middle of 2024, most are getting better looking devices up front here. This looks like a very old and outdated device. Also, it doesn't have any level of Gorilla Glass protection or anything like that, so you have to be careful. On the right, we'll find a key Samsung design element called the key island. Here will be placed the volume keys and also the power button, which at the same time is a fingerprint reader, although thinner than I would like. These buttons are located in this small relief that gives a nice touch of design to the frame that is completely straight for the most part. On the top we find a microphone, while on the left side is the tray where we can place a SIM card and a micro SD card. On the bottom we find headphone jack, a microphone, USB-C port, and the speaker with a single perforation as most Galaxy devices are currently presenting, which gives them a much more minimalist and simple touch. This device has a weight of 189 grams and a thickness of 8 millimeters. I think it's relatively comfortable, although it has very straight lines, so it's not that comfortable in the hand. The back has some texture, so it has changed radically with respect to the proposals that Samsung presents in other much more minimalist devices. This color that I have in my hands is the light green option, but it is also available in black and silver. The back cover reflects the lighting. It is not completely reflective, but neither will we say that it is satin, so it has a very interesting finish with a texture in vertical lines. The cameras are not enclosed in any module, just like the design that Samsung integrates in the vast majority of its devices, betting on a minimalist look. It should be clarified that this device does not integrate any level of resistance against water or dust. You will find that in much more expensive Samsung devices. The screen is wide with 6.7 inches in its diagonal, although the amplitude is the only positive thing since we are in front of an HD plus resolution. It is barely 1600 by 720 pixels, so the level of detail is relatively low. It is a low resolution combined with a large screen space, so the pixels could be perceived especially in small letters. Its pixel density is just 262 pixels per inch, and it also offers PLS LCD technology. This means that the colors are not so vibrant, especially the yellow color is inaccurate, has low contrast, and has poor viewing angles, so it is a screen that wherever you see it is very simple. It is also confirmed because it has only 60 Hz in its refresh rate, although I think this would be the least serious of all the other specifications. Samsung doesn't offer any specific numbers regarding the maximum peak brightness it offers, but it has just enough to look good outdoors. The minimum brightness does feel comfortable, though curiously it doesn't offer the option for extra dimming. So in summary, it is a simple screen, although if you want it for personal use when viewing content from the front, it looks good enough quality. However, from the sides, you will notice that it is a screen that is not perceived well. In the sound experience is very simple. Only has a speaker at the bottom, which is also not very powerful, unclear, and with little presence of bass frequencies, so it is quite simple. But let's listen to a small test, but remember that it is not the same to hear it live. Previously in the entry range, we usually find very powerful speakers, but it has been a long time since I have seen something like this in this price range. Also, at the software level, we will not find an equalizer as we usually find in higher priced Galaxy devices, although it does come with some Dolby Atmos and Dolby Atmos for games, but it does not really offer that level of customization that we find in other Galaxy devices. What we will find will be the independent application sound function that allows us to send the sound to a Bluetooth speaker of certain applications, while the sound of other applications we keep it on the device to have 2 lines of playback without any interruption, so you can play music at a party while watching videos on your cell phone or something like that. It does have a headphone jack, a key addition that is still preserved in this range, but it also has good support for wireless headphones as it supports not only the basic SPC and AAC codecs, but also aptX, LDAC, and of course Samsung's own SSC codec, although not in the high-resolution format. But if you buy headphones with high-resolution LDAC, if you can enjoy it on this device, that is a very positive thing. With respect to microphones, integrates 2, one on the top and one on the bottom. That is a positive thing because in the price ranges usually see only one microphone, then it is a point that we can highlight. Let's do a little test.
Esta es una grabación realizada con los micrófonos integrados del Galaxy A06.
As you will notice, it is a simple recording. Microphones do not get to stand out in this aspect. Next, let's test how they perform in a much noisier environment simulating a concert. As you can notice, the microphones begin to distort the audio too much in these very noisy environments, so it would be highly undesirable if you like to record music events or something like that. And finally, regarding the vibration, it integrates an optical motor on the Z-axis, so it is a simple vibration, although it is what we expected in the range. The front camera is 8 megapixels with f2.0 aperture. Like all Galaxy features fast aperture by pressing the on-off button twice. You can repeat this gesture to rotate the front camera and observe that it does not have a behavior so agile, although it is a little more agile than a lot of more expensive devices. However, after a little time it will show a small message that it is processing the photos, so you can let it rest a little. In the upper right corner, there is a button with which you can load some color filters that you can preview in real time and adjust their intensity. There will also appear the facial beauty control that you can later turn on at the bottom with 4 different parameters with different intensity settings. And finally, despite being a low-end device, it also includes the color tone selector that Samsung debuted on the high end to choose whether you want natural colors or warmer colors. As you can see, it integrates 2 levels of amplitude for photography, and note that it also includes the gesture to recognize the palm of the hand and take pictures easily when you do not reach the shutter comfortably. And in the settings, you can also activate a floating shutter mode so that this button can be placed wherever you want and is much easier to touch. Considering the price of the device, the selfies might be acceptable. I think the level of detail is very low, so for saving memories it doesn't seem to have enough quality to share posts on social networks. Maybe we can still accept it. Also, it is a fixed focus camera, and note that if you have your arm stretched to the max you might start to lose sharpness or level of detail. It's a very close focus camera, although obviously if you're too close you'll also come out of focus, so you need to be at an ideal distance. In backlit conditions, notice that the preview looks completely burned out. After taking the picture though, notice that it balances highlights and shadows very well. In this aspect it performs excellently, but I insist that the focus must be at an optimal distance or else you won't have a good level of detail, plus the photograph looks very pixelated. In indoor scenes I like that it controls noise well, although the colors are a bit pale, but I think that's to be expected in the price range. In fact, I find it surprising how well it handles noise. In night scenes, something very similar happens. Colors are not as accurate but have good noise control. Although in nighttime backlit situations, which is a very tricky situation, you're going to find a lot more graininess in the darker areas and poor exposure of the brighter areas. You can use the screen as a flash simulation, but it is still not a very positive experience because the image is very overexposed. However, using the night mode, it is curious how it manages to improve the image so so well. So it is highly recommended to use the night mode for night selfies. Notice that the color saturation improves very significantly. In fact, it exposes better the most illuminated areas and noise control is very good. I find this mode very positive. And regarding portrait pictures at night, the experience is bad because the foreground is full of noise and the out of focus background is very clean, so it results in a very strange photograph. And in the daytime, we realize that portrait photography is also still very strange with very excessive blurring, even without beauty mode, and it doesn't have the ability to keep objects in focus, although it is more or less expected in the price range. On the back, we will find the 26mm camera with 50 megapixels on its sensor, f-aperture of 1.8 and autofocus. The second camera is supposedly for capturing the depth of 2 megapixels, but it is of no use. Consider that it only has one camera. And again, note that the capture is relatively snappy in the first few captures, but later on it can get a little slower. Especially if you have any backlit scenarios, it will take longer to let you take another picture. Remember that swiping down activates a burst, which in this case can be up to 30 pictures. In our test trying to capture number 3, we found that it has about a quarter of a second delay, so it's not that fast to capture. The burst takes almost a second to start, although fortunately there isn't that much space between shots so you can extract the exact moment. Here on the rear camera, we will also find the button to select some color filter and also face blur with the same 4 parameters that we find on the front camera. You can also tap to adjust exposure or focus. And in the full list of modes also includes Pro mode. This mode will allow us to adjust, for example, ISO up to 3200, shutter speed up to 10 seconds, exposure compensation, focus, and white balance. In addition, at the top you can activate additional options that allow you to regulate issues such as contrast, highlights, shadows, saturation, and tint. So it offers good manual capture settings, which is a real highlight because in the price range almost no device offers so many options. However, it does not support RAW photography. However, the in-camera experience is very complete because it can even scan QR codes without the need to open any additional mode, but directly from the camera. Similarly, the document scanner is going to work directly from the main interface, although in this case it is not such an advanced scanner, but in the price range few devices offer the option to automatically crop documents. So that is another feature we could highlight about it. This device has a high resolution mode in the camera that supposedly allows you to take advantage of all the information from the sensor. However, since it is a bit of a slow device, it seems that this capture takes a bit longer and causes the picture to actually come out very shaky, as they say, and this obviously generates an extremely low level of detail. It is definitely not recommended to use the high resolution mode. Regarding the outdoor captures, I must tell you that the colors are not very accurate. They seem to be much warmer than they are in reality. It's not a camera that's going to stand out too much, but definitely in the price range we couldn't demand more from it. In indoor scenes, it seems to me to do a better job. Interestingly enough, it's a camera that feels more comfortable when there's not as much light. In this scenario, the result was very good, with good noise control, good color saturation, and good lighting. In backlit conditions, the preview looks very washed out. However, the result is good in terms of light and shadow balance. So in this aspect, I think it does do a very good and outstanding job. Even if you apply a bit of digital zoom, it still retains the same balance of highlights and shadows. At night, the result is simple, yet with very good noise control. If you activate the night mode, you will notice that it improves the details of the darkest areas, although curiously the presence of noise that we had seen reduced in the automatic mode increases. So it's up to you as a user what you prefer. However, even with night mode on, it is not able to properly expose the brightest areas. In scenes with motion, note that the device more or less does a good job, although it is not a specialist. Now let me show you the full zoom range. This is the scenario without any zoom applied. Subsequently, with digital zoom 2x is where you immediately realize that it is digital zoom. That is, it doesn't do any cropping on the sensor to maintain optical quality. Now you are looking at the 5x zoom setting, which I would consider should be the maximum allowed, where it still manages to retain acceptable quality. However, the device does let you go up to 10x, but the level of detail is really very low. As for macro photography, it can be a bit tricky to get a good image as the main lens doesn't allow us to get that close. But still, I think the result is positive despite not having a dedicated macro camera, and even though it doesn't have ultra-wide camera, you could use the panoramic mode to try to have a wider capture. Although it must be said that in this case it is a panoramic photograph that despite having a good level of detail, it does not integrate a good dynamic range. So some areas could come out very overexposed and other areas a little darker, so the image quality is not that remarkable, but fortunately the panorama mode seems to work properly. And finally, in our portrait photography test, we noticed that it is not able to keep in focus objects that are located at the same distance. So the portrait pictures are really low quality in this aspect. If you don't have any object nearby, you can still have a nice result as the generated blur is nice, but the result looks very artificial when you have some object nearby. And portraits at night, we are going to notice that they also have the same behavior. Nice blur in the background but poor object detection, so more or less expected in the range, but for being a Galaxy we expected a slightly better behavior in portraits. For video recording, this device can go up to full HD at 60 frames per second, which is surprising in the price range. That's a good thing, although the front camera will only be able to switch between full HD or HD, but in both cases at 30 frames per second. Again, in the upper right corner, you can activate some color filters and even skin blurring as well, compatible with full HD resolution, which is quite remarkable. Although personally, I don't recommend using those options. And note that while recording a video, we are going to have the button to take pictures, although it doesn't show some clear animation. We will also be able to pause and resume our video, turn on the flashlight without the need to cut our recording. And something very remarkable is that it also lets us rotate to the front camera without stopping the video recording. This is something that even much more expensive devices don't allow, so it could be a definite plus point. Video recording will be extremely easy. You see an exaggerated sharpness in order to increase the level of detail a bit, but you immediately realize that it has no stabilization, that the colors are not quite accurate, and that in general it will not be a device that is going to excel in this, although for the price range I insist that we cannot get so demanding in this aspect. In indoor scenes, it is going to suffer a little more than it should since there is not so much illumination, so you notice much more the graininess that can be generated, and the white balance could also be confused more than it should be. In backlit conditions, note that it will give priority to illuminate the face, so when it detects a face and you are backlit, it will burn and overexpose completely all the backlit areas, so it's not at all advisable to shoot in these environments. At night, I think it controls noise well enough. The only detail or drawback I see is that it cannot expose well the brightest areas, but even in the darkest areas, it shows a result quite close to reality. Obviously, it is not as advanced as other devices capable of picking up a huge amount of illumination, but thanks to the good noise control, I think the work is still okay. You can also turn on the flashlight to try to support you a little bit, but I think for the price in night video recording, it could manage to deliver. In this case, the image looks very warm, although I remind you that it was indeed very warm lighting that we were using in that environment. As I had already anticipated, the device does not integrate either optical or digital stabilization, so when walking the movements are perceived very abrupt, and when running the result will be even uglier, so I recommend you to record in static environments. As for the zoom, fortunately it can go in a smooth way. It is not perceived to go by aggressive steps, but obviously it will be a low quality zoom. In addition, the lack of stabilization also complicates recording in these environments, so you can tell that it is a low-end device. The focus could also become complicated in some scenarios, as it is not such a smart device in this aspect. You must have extremely well-defined lines for the focus to react, otherwise it will seem that the focus is completely stuck and it will be necessary to touch to focus, which confirms that it will not be a specialist in video recording. It integrates a fast camera mode that could be useful only when static, because it notes that it has no stabilization in addition to the image quality is very simple. But in static scenarios it could become a bit more attractive, and the slow motion it has is also basic, although it is curious that it does integrate slow motion, since generally in this price range we do not see this kind of options. Although the result is quite simple in terms of resolution and image quality, but other devices in the price range do not integrate slow motion. And the front camera will offer simple video recording, as will the rear camera. You'll notice that many of the lit areas will be overexposed, plus it doesn't have stabilization. It obviously won't have autofocus either, so it's a very simple image. And in fact, although the video resolution is full HD, the image is actually perceived as less detailed. Indoors, the result, as expected, has a bit more noise than expected, although in this environment the level of detail is perceived a little better than the previous recording. And at night, if you are near a light source, you can get a better result. But otherwise, the face and darker areas will appear with much more noise present. But honestly, that for the price range I was expecting a much more disastrous result at night, but the device manages to collect a good amount of light. The only drawback is the presence of excessive noise, and curiously it also integrates front fast camera mode, but it doesn't have slow motion or dual recording. And in the software, we will find one of its strongest points as it integrates One UI version of Android Samsung system that runs on Android 14. In addition, something very good is that it has promised 2 years of software updates and 4 years of security patches. In fact, in this case, I already have an update available to install. In the price range, almost no one is going to promise you updates. That's why this point can become salient. But not only because of a good update policy, but also because of a good set of added tools. For example, you will notice that you can have a pop-up notification style which you can customize and even select which apps you want to use this style and with which effects you want the notifications to appear. You can change the different elements that pop up animation and even the colors that are used. It automatically takes the color of the application, but you could even configure its transparency and duration depending on how you want it to be displayed. Then these notifications, you can also slide them down to open in a floating window. Even if you receive a keyword, you can select to display it in a different color or with a different animation. You also have a complete store of themes where you can explore a large amount of content to completely customize your phone. Not only the wallpaper but also the icons. Or individually, you can explore the different categories available in this store. On the lock screen, you will also find some widgets available that you can activate and rearrange completely to your liking. So notice how you just tap on the clock and these widgets will be displayed on the screen. So notice how you just need to tap once on the clock for these widgets to be displayed on screen and you can have quick access to information or even controls, as you could also have your home controls in this part or access to routines. In fact, the modes and routines section is one of the most interesting sections that no other device in this price range is going to offer you. You can customize sleep or exercise modes so that the device will change some settings, or you can set fully automated routines so that you can control your entire cell phone based on certain conditions. There are a tremendous amount of conditions that you can use to automate all kinds of things on your phone. Just to give you an example, you could say that if the Wi-Fi intensity is too low, turn off the mobile data as to prevent some inappropriate consumption or whatever you want. The truth is that it has many causes and also many consequences to automate all kinds of things on your cell phone. Within the advanced features, we will also find the lab section, where the device allows us to force all applications to work in a multi-window mode. Although it does not incorporate the edge panel sidebar, so it is a bit more complicated to open the applications in a floating mode. You must first run them in a normal mode and then tap on them to transform them to a pop-up view. In this case, the device comes with a good support for this type of applications. In fact, you can resize them, minimize them on the side or minimize in a bubble. You can also activate their full controls and of course you can open several applications in this format. Only that, not having the edge panel function, I tell you that it is much more complicated to work with several applications in this floating view because it requires many steps to be able to activate them in this way. However, in the price range, it is the most advanced management of floating apps that you are going to find. Since, as I was telling you, you can force all apps to work in this way. You can also force some applications to use dark mode, although there are very few compatible. It will also have some movements and gestures that you can use to activate the phone, although they are relatively simple, unlike other devices, and it also has a one-handed operation mode that will allow you to slide down to reduce the size of the screen, which is useful in a device with such a large screen, since in this case you can use any element of the phone directly at your fingertips. It even lets you reposition this small screen and also resize it if you want it to be a bit bigger or as compact as possible. So it's a mode that you really enjoy a lot. And in the gallery, note that it also lets you select multiple images so you can create some GIFs or a collage, but it doesn't have as advanced features as more expensive Galaxy devices. What is integrated from this price range is Samsung members, access to this exclusive Samsung platform, which is also going to allow you to have discount coupons in different stores, either clothing or software, vacation, and many more things. These are privileges that you could definitely take advantage of and could appeal to a good number of users who want to do this. In fact, you could also get access to special offers from Samsung and access to the community to share any problems or share your photos with other users and more. As for security, I was already anticipating you that it has a side fingerprint reader, which I think is a bit small, so the reading might get slightly complicated at times. It takes some getting used to, and you have to leave your finger a little longer than usual compared to other devices with external screen readers. Also, it has a limit of only 3 enrollments for the fingerprint reader, which limits you quite a bit compared to 5 enrollments offered by virtually all devices. It will also offer you facial recognition, but it is only in 2 dimensions, so we don't pay too much attention to this tool as it is not that secure. In this case, it also includes extended unlocking so that the device is not asking you for the code or fingerprint at every moment but remains unlocked in some secure environments. In this case, it does not have Samsung Pass, unlike other devices of the brand, but integrates Google Autofill to fill in forms. Although in this case it does not verify by fingerprint before filling in the information, but from the settings you can activate the I option. What we will see integrated will be the secure folder, where you can place a different pattern than your lock screen and you can place applications and files. So in this section you can have a protected access to all the items you consider private. From outside the secure folder you cannot have app locking, but the secure folder can help. A new feature that has been integrated into all Android devices recently is theft protection, which is able to detect when someone takes your phone supposedly, although I have not tested its effectiveness. By supporting a microSD card, it also lets you encrypt that card so that in case someone removes it, they can't see your information. It also includes the automatic blocker, which allows you to prevent several things and prevent the device from being vulnerable. Although if you are an advanced user, you may need to disable this option to install applications from unknown sources or do more advanced things. But for a basic user, it is important that this option is enabled. Unlike other Galaxy, it does not integrate the secure Wi-Fi feature, which would be a private VPN from Samsung, but it does integrate the dual messenger feature to be able to use 2 accounts from the same application and even separate a list of contacts. It also integrates Samsung Kids, although by default it does not appear as an access on the screen, but you can search for it and later add its shortcut. This tool allows you to lend your cell phone to children with greater confidence, since it is a completely protected environment where they can do nothing more than what you have authorized. So you can set a time limit, set allowed applications, even assign whether or not they have access to the internet, and all protected with your fingerprint or a password. You can even assign a time to go to sleep or even assign frequent contacts, so you can create various restrictions. So this device could be considered useful if you want to give a child their first cell phone, as it is low-powered, inexpensive, and if you activate Samsung Kids, it will not be able to do anything other than what you have authorized. And yet Samsung customizes apps so that, for example, they can call authorized contacts with an app designed specifically for kids that doesn't look like the traditional phone app. Notice that it's well designed. It also has its own camera app that you can install. It even has its own web browser where you can give permission to enter only certain pages. That's why I insist that this could be a good first phone for some kid, since you can create all the restrictions you need. And obviously, to lock Samsung Kids, you must fully authorize it with your fingerprint or pattern. Note that it also has a partnership with McAfee in addition to Google Play Protect, so you can have a scan to avoid any malware. And to try to find your phone in case of loss, in addition to the search with the Google network, it also has Samsung's own network, so you could try to find your device. It is important that you activate all the options to have more chances of finding it in case of a loss. And note that it also has a maintenance mode. In case you are going to send it to a repair, you can simply lock all the content or make a temporary copy in the cloud to restore it later. The battery of this device is one of its most attractive points. Although it has a capacity of 5000 milliamps that you will find in the vast majority of devices, in reality the duration is above average. This is because it has an underpowered processor, so you can't do as many activities as fast, but the battery lasts longer. In my foreground drain test, it lasted 5 hours and 34 minutes, while the average device with this battery capacity lasts about 4.25 hours. So we did find a significant difference. Although in my background test, I realized that the device does not do an intelligent management of the tasks running in the background, so it would be advisable to close the things you are not using so that the battery can maintain a good performance. You know, it integrates the normal saving mode and also an ultra saving mode that you can use when you have an emergency because it restricts several things, although it also lets you add some applications that are essential for you. Regarding charging, you should know that this device does not include a charger in the box. This is definitely one of its ugliest points and against it. For the test, we used the original Samsung charger. However, it can be a little tricky sometimes to find the original charger, or you do not have confidence in knowing whether or not it is the original charger that is being sold to you. However, fortunately, Galaxy devices support the power delivery standard. That means that you can use other chargers that support this standard, and it will be a completely safe charge even though the charger has a support for higher power will adapt. Then in the description, I leave a link where you can buy these chargers. For example, I use the Ugreen brand. There are different types, from very compact ones with few outputs to much more complete ones that have multiple outputs to charge multiple devices at the same time, and as I say, fully compatible with the charging of these devices. So in my test, I used the original Samsung charger, and what I liked is that it is compatible with fast charging. Past generations were supposedly also compatible with 25 watts charging, but in reality they did not charge at that power. In this case, I did use high power for almost the first half hour. That causes it to charge very fast during this stage. In 15 minutes, it recovered 27% of energy. In 30 minutes, it was already above 50%. So if you have little time to charge your cell phone, I think it does recover a good amount of energy. However, later on it starts to get a little bit slower to take care of the health of the battery. So after that first half hour, it drops to about 18 watts, and after an hour it drops to less than 10 watts, and in the final stage it drops to less than 5 watts. The full charge finished it almost in 2 hours. So you should know that it doesn't have such a fast charging process from 0 to 100. But from 0 to 50, it does charge considerably fast. In the range, I think it's the best you're going to find, although it doesn't come with a charger included. So other manufacturers might give you a charger included, but it is much less powerful. Also remember that it also integrates smart charging, so that in case you leave it charging all night, you do not get to damage your battery, as it will turn on your routine and will charge much slower. It also includes charging locks, so that in case you need to have it plugged in at all times, you can block the charge up to 80% and do not go beyond that to not deteriorate the battery so fast. In connectivity, we will find the expected in this price range. It supports 4G networks. Wi-Fi 5 does not offer such high download speeds, but it is expected. The positive thing is that it has Bluetooth 5.3, so it has a good level of stability and range. A bit unexpected in this price range, where we usually find simpler versions. It does not integrate NFC, so you will not be able to configure your cards to pay directly with your cell phone at bank terminals, but it does integrate FM radio, although you need to have headphones connected to use it. One important thing is that it does not integrate Smart View, which is a wireless screen projection feature that we usually find on all Galaxy devices. So this is a major absence if you like screen sharing. Much less is going to be able to project via cable, although what we are going to find will be Android Auto. And with respect to sensors, you are also very limited. It integrates accelerometer and a fully physical proximity sensor, so in those aspects it is fine, but it has no gyroscope or geomagnetic field sensor that might be required in specific applications for some types of users. In the ecosystem, it is clear that Samsung finds one of its main strengths. It is perceived as a very strong brand that is not as dependent on Google as others. We will find a good catalog of devices such as Galaxy Buds, Galaxy Watch, Galaxy Fit, Galaxy Tab, and even in some markets Galaxy Book. Everything interacts very well with each other. You have quick share for file sharing, alarms synced with the watch, you can answer calls from the tablet, and various things. So we see something positive. It even has its own app for everything to do with home devices through Samsung SmartThings. So you can add your light bulbs, your air conditioner, and other things, and you control everything from here or from the watch or from the tablet or from voice commands, because also Samsung usually has its own voice assistant, but Bixby is not integrated in this cell phone. This is something you need to know. Cloud storage is shared with Google Drive and also Microsoft's OneDrive, and you have services like Samsung Health. Samsung also offers you its own Galaxy Store App Store in addition to the Google Play Store. So I insist that it's not perceived as being so dependent on Google. So that's a positive aspect. Let's go to the test of opening applications, but first I'll tell you the specifications it has, as it integrates the MediaTek Helio G85 processor that has been integrated into a lot of devices, but in past years we saw it in the mid-range, so it is good news to find it from the entry range. In fact, this device will be among the best in terms of processor, as most will integrate Unisoc processors in single models. No, unfortunately at Samsung they generally produce very simple performance, but we will confirm that in a moment. In this case it took 7.3 seconds to open each of these 8 applications I opened. It was a simple test due to it being an entry-level device, but it confirms to us that it is not that fast. This is due to the RAM, not so much to the processor, as it notes that once you are in an application, if we are going to find a considerably fluid navigation, the device is not locking up or anything like that, but the problem and difficulty comes when trying to switch between applications. 4 GB of RAM are insufficient, and note that it will constantly generate application restarts. So the ideal in these Samsung devices is to have few applications open at the same time. For example, in this case, I have 4 applications, and we will test to see if with 4 applications, if it is able to maintain a slightly smoother experience when you are switching between them. As you can see, it seems that the experience has improved a bit now that we close other applications, so I insist that you have to have few applications to maintain a relatively smooth experience, as the processor is considerably good for this price range, but the RAM is a little short, especially in Galaxy devices that have many software options, and that makes the RAM can be a little more saturated than the account. In addition to the 4 GB of physical RAM, Samsung supposedly offers virtual RAM, but in Samsung, the truth is that it has never worked well. Samsung calls it RAM Plus, and you can add another 4 GB. I sincerely consider that they are not enough for a good optimal use. In storage, we will find 128 GB in the edition I have in my hands. As I mentioned at the beginning, it is important that you avoid the 64 GB edition, although fortunately you can put a micro SD card to extend the storage, and in this case, Samsung does not offer information regarding the version of storage used, but note that it has read speeds that are not as fast as a modern storage, but I think they do not come to disappoint at all. The right speed is possibly the one that falls a bit short, so installing applications might be a bit slower, or when exporting videos or similar things that we will test in a moment. So these were the results of our storage test. Let's do the test by exporting a video joining several clips recorded with this device with a total duration of 1 minute recorded all in full HD. And already it took more or less 36 seconds, not bad considering its price, although obviously you just have to have that application open because otherwise it will be much slower. Regarding games, if you have the gaming hub, which is where you can collect all the games you have installed, or also give you a look at games that you can run without the need to install or download them to not use so much storage space, then this could be a plus point. In this case, it should be noted that it does not have Game Booster, so you have no additional options to use while you are playing only this manager of all native games. So at the time of running some content, you will not have additional tools. In Call of Duty, the device loads by default the low graphic quality at a medium frame rate. Out of curiosity, we went up to the highest allowed by activating some special filter, and in this case does not support various effects. And I remind you that it is not able to record your screen, so it is definitely not an option to make gameplays. The experience at the time of playing was positive. It is a device that does perform well in this quality setting graphics. Then we will find good stability, good temperature control in the range. I think it is a good opponent because generally in the range we will not find a good performance for games. This processor fortunately behaves well, although I remind you that you should only have open this application or this game in this case, because if you have many things open in the background, the game could behave much slower. In the Legends game, we changed the automatic setting to a low quality setting at 60 frames per second to see what it was capable of. In this case, it started well at 60 frames per second. However, a little later, at about a minute and a half, it started to drop its performance. Maybe it started to heat up a little more, or we do not know specifically, since in fact at the end of the test it did not have a temperature so high, but Samsung has never been known for giving a very good performance in games. So in this case, we will notice that in very long games, maybe the performance will begin to fall. Its lowest peak was 15. Then let's say that the experience was acceptable, but obviously the most demanding games will need something more. However, in this price range will be difficult to find a good device to play. The most advisable will be to buy a device from years past or invest a little more money. Then we played Asphalt in this case with some graphic settings giving priority to performance, although we went up to 60 frames per second. Also in the graphic detail, we gave priority to performance. We disabled several advanced options and everything was set to the most basic possible. And although we lowered several things, in reality the device is not amazing. If you notice some small moments of hitches, and we can see that it is a bit more difficult to find a good device to play. We notice some small moments of stalls or freezes. Some transitions are not smooth, so although it does not drop completely in its frames per second or freeze completely, those freezes can result in a not very pleasant gaming experience. The temperature is well controlled, having a 0.5 degrees Celsius at the time of finishing the test, but still does not seem to be a good choice for gaming. Lastly, we ran Free Fire selecting the standard graphics detail option, but going up to the highest frames per second, and in this case it seems to struggle to run this content even though it averaged 50 frames per second and its highest peak was 61. it has little stability. So if you notice that there are several fluctuations in the frames per second, although that is something that will mainly notice the most demanding in gaming in general, I think it maintains a still sufficiently loose and fluid experience to play, but definitely not a cell phone designed in games. But in conclusion, this device is completely intended for very basic users who will use a maximum of 4 applications at the same time. The cameras are going to be quite simple, although the night mode of the front camera really caught my attention. However, in video recording experience is still perceived very simple than if you have intended to spend more or less what it costs this device, and you liked several features that you only find in Galaxy devices. I would recommend you look more past generations like the Galaxy to 24, perhaps that could get to be in similar prices or even higher models of past years, because they will give you a much better experience in several aspects. However, evaluating it in the current context against its competitors, if we find good strengths like the software, the performance it has in games, the charging power especially, and battery life, then I think it competes well against its current context. But against the context of past years, I would recommend you more past years. For now, we have come to the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know, you can indicate it, and see you next time.